CBS, America's #1 independent television network, presents the following sports exclusive. This evening, live from the Astrodome in Houston, Texas, it's the 18th annual Astro Bluebonnet Bowl game. This year featuring the Texas Tech Red Raiders, co-champions of the Southwest Conference, against the perennial powerhouse of the Big Eight, the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Sims gonna go deep, wants Cooper. Cooper's got it! Touchdown, Alabama!
It's a big moment now for the Knowles defense trying to keep the Gators out of the end zone. A first down throw, and it's picked off! Picked off by Terrence Smith. He's headed the other way. The convoy of blockers. Terrence Smith all the way to the end zone.
Mariota steps up, rips one, perfect strike downfield, and it's Byron Marshall, and he is gone. Touchdown.
Passes intercepted. Georgia Tech wins it.
Here comes a blitz. It's picked up. Gardner, though, is wrapped up by Bosa. The ball's out. Darren Lee's got it for Ohio State. Going for the exclamation point. Touchdown, Buckeyes.
Good morning, football fans. I'm Zach. Along with me is Greg. And Greg, it was a rivalry weekend in college football, and it was not the most compelling of rivalry weekends that we've seen in the past, but still very compelling nonetheless. A lot of big games, a couple upsets, a couple close ones, and the championship picture gets a little clearer or probably gets a little bit muddier depending on your perspective.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because we had a couple things happen that I want to talk about as we get into the show, but there's something in the consideration process that I think is completely ridiculous. But, yeah, a couple teams got knocked out. You know, Mississippi State is probably out of the picture now. A couple teams made some statements. Another team I think is in a little bit of trouble that we've talked about and all that. It was a good weekend. It was a lot of fun. Just not the chaos I was hoping for, but still really, really good rivalry weekend, as it always is.
So we're going to start with college, obviously, and we'll start on Thursday, Thanksgiving night, with the Texas rivalry. This used to be reserved for Texas A&M, but RIP to that great rivalry.
Yeah.
And so now we get TCU and Texas, the number 5 Horned Frogs, trying to stay in contention for that playoff consideration. And, they did what they needed to do, a 48-10 win over a pretty hapless Texas Longhorns team. And not too much to say about TCU there, besides that they're churning along and still one of the more dominant teams in the country.
They did what they had to do. You're absolutely right, because as this thing is playing out, and it really looks like it's going to come down to this, it's TCU and Baylor in contention for obviously the Big 12, but the playoff picture, and it's going to be interesting. TCU went out and did exactly what they needed to do. I don't know that Baylor did what they needed to do, and that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. We'll move on to Friday, and we'll start in the desert, where the Territorial Cup was contested between the Arizona State Sun Devils and the Arizona Wildcats in that dirty hellhole they call Tucson. And it was an entertaining football game. Back and forth, tied at halftime. 14 points by the Wildcats in the third quarter. Gets them a big enough lead to where Arizona State, they tried to come back. They had the ball late, and they couldn't do anything with it. They switched to Mike Bercovici halfway through this game. Why, I'm not really sure. Taylor Kelly was fine, I thought, but Todd Graham looking for any sort of spark to knock off the Wildcats, unable to do so. And Arizona State, they will finish the regular season at 9-3 with a 42-35 loss to Arizona, who is now in position to move on because this day would have been so great, but this made it even better. Stanford marches into the Rose Bowl and beats down UCLA 31-10. Knocks the Bruins out of the Pac-12 title game. Arizona wins the Pac-12 South They will go on to the Pac-12 title team to face Oregon this Friday.
Okay, a couple questions. First off, awesome for Stanford to finally, at long last, put the final stake or the final nail in the coffin of UCLA.
Yes.
Because UCLA started out the season way overrated, and we saw them fall. And then by circumstances that they didn't have a lot of control over, they started climbing slowly back into the picture again. And I was just like, this team is overrated. They're not this good. So, Stanford, thank you for doing that. But on to the Territorial Cup, I want to ask you, as an Arizona State fan and an Arizona State alum, okay, you lost the game. Your team finished the season 9-3. But in reality, taking away the tough loss, do you think the Sun Devils had a better season than you expected going into the season this year?
Yes and no. I mean, I expected them to compete for the Pac-12 South title, and they did. I honestly had expected them to win the Pac-12 South, so a little disappointment there. But I was surprised in how dominant they were at certain points of the year, and the fact that they were in playoff contention there.
Right.
I mean, they were the legitimate number 6 team in the country for 2 weeks before they lost, or I guess a week, and then they lost to Oregon State. But they were a legitimate national title contender for the middle part of the season, and and they have that one stupid loss to Oregon State, and that drops them out. So it was their own problem. It was their own fault. Losses to Oregon State, not a good loss, but UCLA they got blown out in, and that was a weird game. And then this tight one against Arizona in a game that can, I mean, really people say, well, you can throw out the records. This is a game where you really can, because it goes no matter where either team is in the standings or in the rankings, it can go either way. But it just so happened that this year both teams are pretty decent, and I'm satisfied with it. I can't wait to go to the Holiday Bowl again, or wherever the hell they send us. Or no, I guess it's the loser of the Pac-12 title game that we go to the Holiday Bowl. I guess we go to the Alamo Bowl. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was a good season. But finishing off losing to Arizona never makes it a great season.
Right.
But for Arizona, how much now? And you see all the troubles that with Michigan, and you saw them up close. What do you think Michigan's thinking about Rich Rodriguez right about now?
Well, I think that he's a good coach, and I think he works in the right place. He wasn't right for Michigan. I think they'd love to have his 10-2 record right now, and some of the wins that the Wildcats have put up. But in the grand scheme of things, I still think that they were happy. If they knew this was going to happen, they'd want to keep him around. But he was a bad fit from the start. I said it back when they hired him. It was never going to work out because, first off, it's very tough to play that kind of football in Michigan's weather. Secondly, they are one of the few schools in all of big-time college football that actually does concern themselves with an academic record. And I just don't think he was going to recruit the guys they wanted. So it was a bad match, but sure, they'd take it, especially after the season they've had this year. But
yeah, he's definitely a better fit in Arizona. Less pressure.
Right.
Because really, Arizona's a basketball school.
Exactly.
When they're good in football, it's a plus for them.
Right. It's like Duke, like a lesser version of Duke, yeah.
Right. Like Arizona beating Arizona State in football is a bigger deal than them beating us in basketball.
Right.
But it's like if we beat them in basketball, it'd be a big deal because Arizona is a perennial contender in basketball. So, I don't know.
But just one more thing on Rich Rodriguez, too. I think that's another thing that helps him a lot. West Virginia, not a lot of pressure to win there. So anything he did exceeded expectations.
Right.
He's never going to exceed expectations at Michigan no matter what he does. All he can do is, at best, is live up to them. In Arizona, it's the same thing. He goes 10-2, it's a bonus season. So, yeah.
Because especially in the division they're in. I mean, normally it's USC, UCLA, Arizona State. And even UCLA is kind of up and down. But they're the fourth most important football school in that division.
Right.
So congratulations, Arizona.
Wow, that had to be really tough for you to say.
Yeah. They get a second shot at Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, and we can talk about that when we get to the schedule.
I just want to throw in one more thing on the Territorial Cup game.
Yeah.
People talk about Ohio State, Michigan. They talk about Auburn, Alabama, the big rivalries. I don't know that this one is as big nationwide, but in my experience, I have never seen a fan base where the two sides hate each other as much as you guys do.
Yep.
I mean, if you're just talking pure intensity,
it's the oldest trophy in college football, by the way.
And if it's just a pure, like, sheer do not like each other, you guys win that one in a walk. Maybe Auburn, Alabama's a close second, but after that, it ain't even close.
Yep. Yeah, Territorial Cup goes to the Wildcats. Yeah. This sucks.
Well, what are you going to do?
We're going to go win a bowl game, I guess, and move on to next year. We'll move on to the SEC and go to the SEC East and the Missouri Tigers taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. It was a tight game throughout. Arkansas was actually up 14-6 at half and going into the fourth quarter, but 15 points by the Missouri Tigers in the fourth quarter rallies them to a 21-14 win and the SEC East title. And no matter what Georgia did on Saturday, and because that was an out-of-conference game, Missouri clinches the SEC East, and they move on to play in the SEC title game against Alabama. So Missouri, they're 17, and beating Arkansas, not a big deal. I don't know how far they're going to move up based on what happened below them. But they're pesky. I mean, they came out of. Nobody's talked about Missouri all season.
That's what
all of a sudden they're 10-2 and they're in the SEC title game again.
That was one of the teams I wanted to talk about. This Missouri team. It was. I mean, we went into this last weekend thinking after the show last week thinking it was all about Georgia without even giving Missouri so much as a thought. But here they are. They're the Eastern Division champions in the SEC. They're going to play Alabama for the championship. And 2 weeks ago they weren't even ranked.
Right.
That's what's amazing about it. And I tell you, the way Alabama's played outside of Tuscaloosa, where they've been kind of up and down, I'm not going to say that they don't have a shot in this game. I think they might have a real shot at knocking off Alabama. But yeah, the Missouri Tigers, a team no one talked about, and here they are.
Missouri's also a team that Missouri also lost to Indiana this year.
Yeah. That hurts a lot. That hurts an awful lot.
So, yeah,
But think about it, though. I mean, they went into everybody thought, boy, Missouri and the SEC, that's not going to work well at all. But look at them. Isn't this like their second year in a row in the championship game? Or like 2 out of the last 3 or something like that?
I haven't seen too much of Missouri, so I don't know what they're really good at or anything. I mean, I guess they have as good a shot as any in the SEC title game, but I don't that where Alabama is now that they have their eyes set on the prize, and Nick Saban's not going to let them, slip at all.
I'm not saying that Alabama's on upset alert. I'm just saying that Missouri, normally you would think, like you would say, okay, they've got no shot, but I think they've got a shot. Now, do they think they'll win? Probably not. But it wouldn't be the most shocking upset in the world to see Missouri pull this off, because if they've got the whole nobody believes in us thing going on right now.
We'll finish off Friday with one of the last undefeated teams. I mean, we all know about Florida State, but we kind of forgot about Marshall. The Thundering Herd, they were 11-0 going into the week, ranked number 24. They finally got into the rankings, only to lose in what was a crazy shootout of a football game. 28-21 after the first quarter. Western Kentucky was leading, then 21 points each in the second quarter. And it slowed down considerably in the second half. But the two teams went into overtime, and Western Kentucky knocks off the Marshall Thundering Herd 67-66.
I saw this game go by on the score ticker. Honest to God, I thought it was a basketball score. I really did. It didn't even occur to me that it was a football. But yeah, Marshall, any even slight sliver of an argument they had for being a playoff team is gone now. And
they weren't really competing for a playoff spot at this point. They were competing for the top of the group of 5 thing.
Right.
Or, basically the BCS Buster. But it was funny because even though they were undefeated, they were still ranked behind another group of 5 team, which is Boise State.
That's a team I wanted to bring up because they're kind of like Missouri. It's like all of a sudden, hey, where did these guys come from?
The non-power conference teams this year are kind of not the same caliber as they have been in years past. We were early in the season we were all looking at East Carolina, but they fell off pretty quick there. So, but the quarterback there for Western Kentucky, Brandon Doughty, 34-50, 491 yards and 8 touchdowns in that win over Marshall.
Not a bad day at the office.
Yeah. So sorry, Marshall.
Yeah.
We all knew you were a paper tiger because you hadn't beaten anybody this year, and you lost to your first kind of decent team.
Not only that, but you gave up 67 points for God's sakes.
Right at home. Ugh. Anyway, goodbye, Marshall.
They'll still get a bowl bid. Enjoy that trip to Detroit.
moving on to the big day on Saturday. We'll start with the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide taking on Auburn in the Iron Bowl, number 15, the Auburn Tigers. And in the first half, Auburn looked to be the better team. They were more consistent on offense. They were getting things done through the air. And I thought they were controlling this game early on, but Alabama, being Alabama, they rebounded there in the second half. Brandon Sims, the quarterback, found his game and was able to hit Amari Cooper for a huge day. Amari Cooper, 13 receptions, 224, and 3 touchdowns, leading the Alabama Crimson Tide to a 55-44 win in the Iron Bowl, the highest scoring Iron Bowl in the game's history.
It sure was, and I'll tell you what killed Auburn. Auburn was in complete control of this game until Sims hit Amari Cooper. I think it was on a first down play for 75 yards and a touchdown.
Yep. And
you could almost see it with Auburn, like we just woke up the sleeping giant. It changed the entire momentum of that game and went completely into Alabama's favor at that point because Auburn had it won, and then when they let that touchdown go, that's where Alabama just hit the gas and ran right past them. But it was a good game, and a 55-44 score in the Iron Bowl. What happened to all that vaunted SEC defense?
Yeah, it was a different type of game. Definitely a passing game, but I don't know. Auburn. It's just so funny to see all these SEC West teams because we've been talking about it for weeks of how they were just the top of the heap, and all of a sudden, and then it's like, well, now Auburn finished with 4 losses.
Right.
LSU was nowhere to be found.
Right.
Ole Miss, I mean, they got a win that we'll talk about in a minute, but they have 3 losses. Mississippi State finally fell off. And at the end of the day, who stands amongst the broken wreckage is Alabama, as they always do. We knew that they were one of the better teams in college football all year. You're always looking for a reason to kind of knock Alabama down a peg.
Right.
It's like, well, they got to fall off. They can't be this good every year. And Nick Saban's made this team good every single year, and it's a testament to that program, and it's another decade of Alabama dominance, you know?
Exactly, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't know how you could argue anyone else other than Nick Saban as being the greatest college coach of all time. He has won everywhere. Of all time. He's won everywhere he's coached. He took a Toledo team that had won, I think, 3 or 4 games the year prior and won with them. He did it at Michigan State. Now he's doing it at Alabama. He did it at LSU. He's just, I don't know. To me, he's the greatest. I mean, God, it's not. It would be one thing if he had never done anything until he got to Alabama and then he got all that talent and all of a sudden he's good. But he has won everywhere he's ever gone. He's a great coach. No way around it.
He's a very good coach. I mean, outside of the Miami Dolphins experiment, but
right. Not a good NFL coach, although a great coordinator. Another thing on his resume, 1 year as a defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns under Bill Belichick, and a team that was 7-9 the year before went 11-5, made the playoffs. Saban left, they went right back down the tubes again. Well, of course, they also moved to Baltimore that year, so it's hard to say how much that had to play. But my point is that the guy has won and improved everywhere he's ever coached. And to me, I just don't know anybody else you can say that about.
No, he's one of the best. He earns all of the money that he gets, and he already had a statue out front of the Alabama Stadium, but they could build him another one.
Well, how many national championships has he won? I know he got 1 at LSU. How many has he gotten at Alabama?
Did he get 1 or did he get 2?
I maybe 1 or 2, but how many has he gotten at Alabama?
Oh, God, 3?
Yeah, or 4. I don't even know at this point, but that's the thing. To me, he's just the greatest college coach of all time. I don't know who else you could argue in his place, really. Just based on his resume, I mean, who else is there?
Yeah, I mean, as far as range of schools, probably just him. Trying to think of other guys. I don't know.
Anyway, that's
the old Notre Dame coaches like Ara Parsegian or whoever.
Yeah, that's a conversation for basically a sports show anyway. We should stick to the matter at hand here, but
yeah. Anyway, so Alabama, they clinched the SEC West, and we'll move on to play Missouri in the SEC title game in Atlanta next week.
Yes.
We'll move on down. Oregon in the Civil War against Oregon State. Oregon just demolished the Beavers. It wasn't really a contest.
Nope.
Marcus Mariota, 6 touchdowns in this game, running and throwing. He's the Heisman Trophy winner, right?
I gotta think so. Who else would you give it to?
There's other guys that you could say, like Amari Cooper's been great. Melvin Gordon, the running back at Wisconsin's been really good, but he's the real deal. He's the whole package. And he's been that way all season. Yeah, he had a little lull against, say, Arizona, and early on in the season they had some struggles, but he's been far and away the most fantastic player in college football all season.
The only thing I can see hurting him is that the fact that he plays at Oregon. I mean, you think about if you put Marcus Mariota on, I don't know, say Texas or Florida or somewhere like that, we're going to never hear the end of him. But because he plays at Oregon and it's the whole East Coast bias thing, he doesn't get as much publicity. So you might have a lot of people that, again, I don't think they should, but you could see Amari Cooper getting a lot of it because, first off, it would be giving the award to a wide receiver over the typical quarterback or running back type thing. But in my book, if I had to vote, Mariota's my choice without doubt. No question about it.
I think he hasn't gotten the hype this season as much because Oregon hasn't played in the huge marquee games.
Yeah.
You know? Their Pac-12 schedule, they've avoided the big dogs for the most part, and Stanford, their perennial foe, isn't as good this year. They had their big game early in the season when they played Michigan State,
right?
And they won that game convincingly. It's anybody who looks at the numbers, anybody that actually knows college football knows who Marcus Mariota is, knows how dominant he's been week in and week out, and he's on an 11-1 football team that's. Assuming they win next week, which is extremely possible that they could lose because they already lost to this team once. He's going to the national the playoff. So,
yeah, and another thing about Mariota too, real quick, is that he's not the prototypical Oregon quarterback. This isn't like a Dennis Dixon or somebody like he can do it all, and. Yeah. I'm really going to be curious to see how he does in the NFL because he is the full package, and anybody with a vote should vote him as a Heisman winner, but you never know. But he's the runaway favorite.
I think he's got to be the best quarterback coming out next year. Right?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It's going to be either him or Jameis Winston, but I think after this year, it's Mariota.
Well, Mariota's going to have more experience. Winston's got some issues, off the field.
It's a lot of issues.
And he, from my understanding, again, I don't know much about Jameis Winston, but my understanding is he's not Mariota's the guy. If you're looking at as an NFL general manager, he's the guy you want because he's just more plug and play ready to go. I think than Winston would be at this point.
Speaking of Jameis Winston, the Florida State Seminoles, they did it again. Somehow they did it again. A 24-19 win over their rival, the Florida Gators. The Gators aren't a good football team this year.
No.
But they still made it competitive against Florida in Tallahassee. So Florida State's 12-0. They're not going to move up, right? They're going to be number 3.
I can't see them passing Alabama or Oregon at this point, no. Do they drop maybe? TCU's got the dominant win over, a Texas team that's not very good. No, it's probably going to all stay the same. But, again, this is a Florida team that's not very good. You've got them in your place, and it took everything you had to beat these guys.
I keep hearing the argument from other places now of, people keep bragging on them, but they're winning the games. You got to say something for that. I don't know because Florida State's schedule isn't a world beater.
Not only that, but Marshall won all the games. I mean, if that's all it's about, then why hasn't Marshall been in the discussion all season?
True, right?
It isn't the beauty contest it used to be, but there still has to be, especially with the playoff committee, you've got to look at it. Who are the 4 best teams? Not the 4 best records, the 4 best teams. You could certainly argue that Florida State's one of the top 4, but you could argue just as easily that they're not. And that's going to be interesting as this thing plays out. But had they lost, do you think they would have dropped out of the playoff picture completely?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I think so, too.
Yeah, losing to the Florida team at home, and based on how close all their games have been all year, people it's almost like somebody's just waiting for them to lose just so they can drop like 6 spots.
Exactly.
Right. It's the moment that they did, or there's only one more chance for them to lose and possibly get knocked down, and it's a good possibility based on the way that this Georgia Tech team is playing.
You got to give them credit for the fact that they have won all their games.
Yeah.
And that's great. And, under normal circumstances, that's a really great thing. But, again, it's about the 4 best teams in the country. And are they one of the 4 best? Could you look at them right now and say, okay, they could beat Alabama. Alabama would wipe the floor with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oregon would kill them, too.
Mississippi State would kill them.
Mississippi State.
TCU, Baylor.
Even Ohio State with JT Barrett at quarterback, I like their chances against Florida State. And that's not a strong Ohio State football team. They're probably going to get in, although, you got Georgia Tech playing really good football right now. They run that crazy triple option that I love so much. Florida State's not seen that this year. It could be very interesting next Saturday in the ACC title game.
Let's move on to the number 4 team, and for the longest time, it was Mississippi State. They were the darlings of college football. They were on top of the world. They lose to Alabama, but they're still number 4. They're still right there in the thick of all this. They could very easily still make this playoff if things break right for them. Well, not so much anymore, as the game they had waited for all season, the most important Egg Bowl of all time, and Ole Miss takes the Golden Egg with a 31-17 win over their rival Bulldogs. Ole Miss finishes 9-3, Mississippi State 10-2, and Mississippi State's going to drop out. But a good season there for the Bulldogs ends with a loss to Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl.
I got to say, I've watched Mississippi State play twice this year. Now, I don't know if it was the quality of their opponent or what, but I have not been terribly impressed either time watching these guys.
Yeah,
which makes me wonder if they weren't just a little bit of a mirage throughout this whole thing.
I don't think so. I mean, I watched them play against Auburn earlier in the year, and bits and pieces of their other games. Dak Prescott, their quarterback, was really good. You know, if Mississippi State had won these 2 games that they had lost, and they were the number 1 team in the country, he'd be the Heisman hype guy. He'd be the guy that everyone was trying to hype up as he should get it over Mariota because he's dynamic. He does all the same things, but he's on a great team in the SEC sort of thing. So he's been great. They've been a big physical team, but they were just outclassed by Alabama as being a better team. Alabama was, and even that game was still close. And then this is a rivalry game where Ole Miss has shown this year that they're a very competent football team. And had they not had a couple dumb mistakes, they too could have been right up there in this playoff talk. But it's not a bad loss. It's just it's a tough gauntlet there in the SEC,
right?
And it's kind of cliche to say that it's a tough gauntlet in the SEC, but it really is.
Yeah, it's not an easy schedule if you're playing that SEC West schedule. There aren't a lot of easy marks on that schedule. There are some, but there aren't that many.
Right.
I haven't seen enough of them this year to make a decision one way or the other. The 2 times I've seen them, they struggled, but I have not watched enough to say that, they're not that good. I just wondered if maybe they weren't as good as people thought, but it sounds to me like they are a pretty good football team.
Yeah, they're a pretty good team. They're still going to get a very good spot in a bowl game, and it depends on how far they fall in the rankings. But if they stay in the top 10, they're still going to be very, very much eligible for any of those New Year's Day bowls.
They're a very attractive team for a bowl, especially a Southern Bowl like the Orange Bowl, somewhere along those lines.
Right, because they're a team that hasn't been there in a while. They have a really strong following. It's you put them in one of those bowls, they're gonna get the people in the building. So
absolutely.
We'll move on to number 6 Ohio State in the game against Michigan, the Wolverines. A big win there for Ohio State, 42-28, knocking off their rivals. I wouldn't say too much of a problem. I mean, they were tied at halftime, but clearly Ohio State pulling away there in the second half. But the story for this Ohio State team really isn't the win. The most important thing is the loss of the starting quarterback, J.T. Barrett, second Ohio State quarterback to go down this year. Braxton Miller, of course, before the season. They're just on the precipice of a playoff push, and now they lose their second quarterback this season. Who is the third quarterback for this Ohio State Buckeye team, Greg?
Cardell something or another. I think it's Jones, maybe?
Cardell Jones, I think.
Cardell Jones, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The Cardell Jones, though, is a beast of a man. He's 6'5", 250, and he's a quarterback. But this is something that now you get the interesting discussions about the rankings and where the committee puts teams. Because Ohio State is 11-1, and they've really bolstered their playoff resume. Assuming they win the Big Ten title game next week, they're going to be right there in that conversation with Baylor and TCU. But without J.T. Barrett, is Ohio State a true contender?
Well, see, that's the big question that's going around since J.T. Barrett went down, and it drives me nuts because, first off, they still have to beat a very good Wisconsin team next Saturday. So before we can even talk about what Barrett's injury means to the playoff push, they have to get past that. But the thing is that if you're going to do this right, you have to put teams in based on what they've done, not on what might happen as things continue. I don't like it. I understand why people are saying, well, Barrett out, are they this and that, the other thing. Look, if they go on and they win the Big Ten championship and they beat Wisconsin, they have to be in the discussion regardless of who's playing at quarterback because, again, you're judging it. You're not doing this on speculation. You're doing it on hard evidence of what has happened. So, yeah.
I think the thing is with the NCAA and committees, the only kind of precedence we have for this is the NCAA tournament in basketball, right?
Right.
And in the NCAA, there is precedent for teams' seedings in the tournament being lowered because of their potential because they're seeded based on their ability to win the tournament in basketball. So the committee is not just about putting the teams that are deserving, but the teams that would be the most competitive in these games.
Right.
So, so I think without JT Barrett, it certainly knocks Ohio State down. But if Cardell Jones can come in and have an impressive showing against Wisconsin, or at least a competent showing against Wisconsin, then they're going to have just as much of a shot as anybody else. It just depends on – right now TCU's ahead of them, and they're probably going to stay there when the rankings come out later today. I would assume TCU just moves up to number 4, and Ohio State moves to 5, and Baylor stays at 7. And so I would assume, if Baylor plays a ranked team, TCU doesn't, Ohio State plays a ranked team, right?
Right.
So then it becomes, is Ohio State better than Baylor? Because I think if Ohio State wins the Big Ten title game, no matter what, I think they jump over TCU based on beating a ranked opponent. Now, Baylor also playing we'll move on to Baylor so we can bring them in here. Baylor with a 48-46 win against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is 4-8 this season.
Exactly.
So a 2-point win over the Red Raiders in Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, too. I don't know why that game was there. But a not impressive game there for Baylor. And Baylor also has the issue of Bryce Petty got concussion in this game.
Yes, he did.
And this is his second concussion this year. So supposedly he's going to be playing this Saturday when they play Kansas State because, of course, he is. If they have to win this game to stay in playoff, even make the playoff to be thrown in there for consideration for that 4th spot.
Right.
But you can only beat Baylor or Texas Tech by 2 points.
Well, that's the thing, and we had argued all season long that, or at least when they got to that point in the rankings, that Baylor should be ahead of TCU. But I listened to Kirk Herbstreit make a very good argument last night. He said, yes, when it comes right down to it, if both teams are so dead equal that the only choice you have is to take the head-to-head matchup, then you go that route. But he goes, with this committee, it's not about that. It's about which is the better team of the two. And he said that he thinks TCU overall is the better football team.
And I would agree with that.
I do too. And it kind of changed my mind on it. I thought, he's kind of right there. Yeah, they lost to Baylor. But if I had to bet money tomorrow on who I like better, I'm going with TCU every single time. They're the better team in my book. So it's a whole new thing now.
And you look at this game, and then you also look back to that TCU-Baylor game. It was TCU was up by 21 points on the road. And yes, they blew it, but they blew it, and it was a last-second field goal that they lost on. So, if you could have any more of a dead-even game than that one, and even it wasn't even that dead-even because TCU was up by the 21 points, I think and if they do that over again, I'm pretty sure TCU probably finishes that game out. And if Bryce Petty isn't 100%, if Baylor barely beats Kansas State, because Kansas State, they're ranked. They're number 12 right now. They're probably going to be like number 11 or 10 based on the teams that lost. But if we're just going off of beating ranked teams, then yes, Baylor would move forward. But if you look at the overall body, which they're supposed to do,
exactly,
then maybe you hold Baylor back. But the other problem is Baylor would be the Big 12 champ.
Exactly.
TCU would not be.
Right.
And I know TCU is probably the better team. They're going to have an equal record. The one loss that's separating them is a tight game where TCU could have easily won in bigger fashion. But Baylor's still going to be the Big 12 champ.
That's what it comes down to, and that's my next point I was going to bring up. All things being equal, yes, TCU is the better football team, but can you, in your first year with this playoff committee, can you honestly sit down and go, look, yes, Baylor's the Big 12 champ, but we're taking TCU instead? I mean, people that aren't even fans of those teams are going to lose their minds over that. It puts the committee in a very tough spot. I'm sure that they're all in that little room they have in that commercial they show on ESPN. They're all in there praying right now that Kansas State knocks Baylor out, and we don't have to have this discussion.
Right. If Baylor loses, then it's clear cut and dry. That it's going to be Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, TCU.
Right.
Right. No matter what Ohio State does, I think
exactly.
TCU would probably stay ahead of them.
I do too. Yeah.
Because TCU plays what? Kansas, I think.
Something like that. Yeah. They should win out.
Or Iowa State.
Yeah. Okay.
2-9 Iowa State.
Right. Exactly.
2-8 in the Big 12 Iowa State.
Right. It's one of those things where last week going into this weekend, Ohio State needed help to really solidify their spot in the playoff. Well, first off, the help they needed, like having Alabama lose to Auburn, didn't happen. Having Oregon get knocked off didn't happen. And then they lose their quarterback. So right now they're in a position where you're right. TCU is definitely in the spot right now. They went out there. They're probably in if Baylor knocks off Kansas State. But that's the big debate right now. Ohio State really doesn't play a role in this unless Baylor loses. Then it gets really interesting because then you've got to decide, okay, which way, and Ohio State wins. So, but right now,
I think too. Well, if Ohio State goes in and beats Wisconsin convincingly,
right,
and then you have a situation where Baylor is the Big 12 champion, and so then they have to weigh that against TCU over Baylor, or Baylor over TCU with Baylor being the champion, and then you say, well, Ohio State's they've been more impressive than Baylor as of recently, and they beat another ranked team. If Ohio State can get a good enough win in this Big Ten title game, they will have just as good as an argument as anybody else. If it's tight, if they obviously if they lose, then it's no issue. But if it's tight, then it's that three-way discussion between Baylor, Ohio State, and TCU. That is going to be, if anything, it's going to be the catalyst to say, well, we should really have 6 teams,
right?
Then it's going to be like, well, okay, well then, yeah, because if you had 6 teams, then both those teams would be in, and you'd have no argument from number 7 or whoever. But,
right.
I don't know. It's
here's what I think.
That's the biggest intrigue going into this final weekend is that particular trifecta.
Here's what I think happens. Okay, and this is and believe me, there's a lot of miraculous things will have to happen for this to play out, but. If Ohio State goes in and just beats the daylights out of Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game behind Cardell Jones, and the other two went out, I think that they will solve their own problem by going, look, Ohio State did this with their third-string quarterback against a ranked team. Right. We're moving them to number 4, and that ends the debate between TCU and Baylor.
Right.
I don't know if that would be fair, and I don't know that I would agree with it, but that's probably what happens. Anything short of that, if Ohio State barely wins, Baylor and TCU both win. I think Ohio State falls out of the discussion, and it's all about Baylor and TCU at that point, and that's not what they want, but I think that's what they're going to end up with.
Yeah. Just to note, Wisconsin is actually a 4-point favorite right now in the Big Ten title game.
They sure are.
In Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis.
The one thing I would say for the Buckeyes is that this Cardell Jones, like you said, he's a big guy. And if they want to just go to a power running game with using him out of the read option and Ezekiel Elliott and all that, that gives them a chance. But losing J.T. Barrett, as much as I don't want to admit it, and as wrong as I think it might be, it is something that they're going to have to consider. Because I just don't know that the Ohio State Buckeyes can roll to a national championship behind their third quarterback of the season. I just don't see that happening.
Well, and think about the scenario. Say they do get in. They're probably going to. The only way they get in is with that number 4 spot, right?
Right.
They would have to play Alabama in the first round.
Exactly.
In the Sugar Bowl.
Right.
Ohio State with their third quarterback going into the Sugar Bowl to play Alabama?
Right.
Are you kidding? No, that would be a slaughter.
Not to mention the fact that the SEC just loves beating the daylights out of Big Ten teams, so it would get real ugly, yeah.
Right, particularly Ohio State.
Yeah.
They've done it a fair amount.
Yep.
But yeah, and not to mention it would be Nick Saban versus Urban Meyer again, too.
Right.
And I'm sure Nick would love to just screw it to Urban Meyer. Because not only did Urban Meyer knock him off, Urban Meyer was in the Utah coach when Utah beat Alabama, right?
I think he was. No, he wasn't. Not at that point.
He was gone by then.
Right.
But either way, we'll move down the rest of these real quick. Only a few games that really mattered. But the big one, in terms of teams that qualified for their championship games. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
How about them? They contribute to a 4-0 day for the ACC over the SEC when it comes to rivalry games. But of course, a lot of the ACC guys are trumping that up like, hey, we were 4-0 against the SEC.
You beat the SEC East and the bad teams.
Right. You beat, the only good win was this one against Georgia.
Right.
A tight game throughout, back and forth. Go into overtime where Georgia Tech pulls out the game 30-24 over the Georgia Bulldogs. And the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck, they take the Governor's Cup into their ACC title game matchup against the Florida State Seminoles.
I tell you what, I like this Georgia Tech team. I love that crazy offense. And I don't want to watch this offense every week. Don't get me wrong. I'm not some old school idiot that loves, but just for a once in a while fun thing, I like their chances against Florida State an awful lot. I really do. This is a good football team. That offense is something that if you haven't seen it, it's tough. I mean, look, I've watched there's no one can possibly argue that Navy is as good a team as Ohio State, but I have watched Navy give Ohio State fits with that triple option offense. Mm-hmm. And that's without the talent really to run it effectively. Georgia Tech has the talent to run that offense. It's going to be an interesting ACC title game, and I really like Tech's chances to finally end the Florida State nightmare.
And really, Georgia Tech is probably your best hope for getting Ohio State in there without any argument, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, too. If Florida State loses, then we've got a whole other thing going on.
Right. Well, if Florida State loses, and we can talk about it again in a second, but Oregon could very well lose to Arizona as well.
Right.
So, still some opportunities, but
that's a question, too, though. If Oregon loses to Arizona, are they going to drop right out of it? I think they do with Mississippi State. They just drop down to 4. I don't think they fall out of the picture. I don't think.
Well, the other question is, do you vault Arizona up into the top 4 because of that? Because Arizona is going to be in the top 10.
I don't know.
Arizona's going to be in the top 10 if they knock off the number 2 team in the country for the second time this season.
Right.
Once on the road and once at a neutral site. You got to give them some consideration too. As much as I would hate to see it,
that's the thing.
They've got to get just as much consideration as anybody else.
I mean, I've been saying it for the past 3-4 weeks now, but we're getting, every weekend now is becoming like this. If things fall the right way, we could get chaos, and we've got another weekend of that to go through here.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds like a broken record, but this weekend's going to be great, and it's going to really settle a lot of things, and it will finally once and for all, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is the weekend that truly matters.
Yeah,
like the rivalry weekend is fun, and it throws a lot of things into perspective. But this is the weekend that seals it. This is it. These are playoff games.
Yeah,
essentially. Alabama has to win. Florida State has to win. Arizona or Oregon have to win. Ohio State has to win.
Exactly.
TCU, Baylor, they all have to win or they're eliminated.
Yeah.
So
we talked like elimination weeks. We've been talking about it for the last 4 or 5 weeks, but what happened in those weeks was that your chances were eliminated or hurt. They weren't really eliminated. Now we're into this is really elimination weekend. If you lose, you're done. Simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, even if Alabama loses to Missouri for some reason, I don't think you can keep them in there. Or maybe you do. I don't know.
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I think that in that little room that they're in, they're all praying right now that first off, that Kansas State beats Baylor, that Ohio State loses. If Ohio State loses and Kansas State beats Baylor, all problems are solved if everybody else wins.
If they want their job to be as straightforward as possible. But if it comes to where they really like actually have to make every decision.
Yeah.
Like, if Alabama loses, do they keep them in the top 4 even though they didn't win the SEC?
Not only that, but they'd have 2 losses.
Right. They'd be like, well, Alabama has the body of work, and we know they're one of the best teams in the country, but they're not the conference champion.
Exactly.
Like, there is a doomsday scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Where all 4 teams in the playoff are not conference champions.
Well, here's another thing, too. I mean, just to think about this for a second, you've got scenarios that could play out where, at the end of the day, despite the fact they're on their 3rd quarterback, the Ohio State Buckeyes could fall out of this and come into it ranked number 1 in the country. I'm not saying that's going to happen. There's a very slim chance of that, but that's how critical these games are. That if everybody else loses and the Buckeyes win, I don't know how – and I'm not saying they should be. I'd be the first person to say they don't deserve it. But if they're the only team left with 1 loss, how do you not put them at number 1?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be nutty, and I really kind of hope it is, but we'll see. I think if Florida State goes down, that is going to cause some problems. If Ohio State wins big, that's going to cause some more problems. It's just there's so many scenarios where this thing could just fall apart and all of a sudden it is complete, utter chaos. But if everything plays out like it's supposed to, it should be relatively easy. But this is the biggest weekend yet. You're absolutely right.
Go through these the rest of them real quick. Michigan State, they finish out the season 10-2. Probably the best team that's not going to go anywhere, right? Unfortunately,
yeah.
They're going to be in the top 10, and maybe they get considered for one of those extra bowls. But I don't know what to do with Michigan State. They're a decent team. They're pretty good, but they're not going to any conference championship games. They're not in playoff contention. They're just a good team that's hanging around.
Yeah, the 2 times that they have played highly ranked opponents, they've gotten handled both times. So you got to kind of hold that against them. But then again, if you're talking 2 losses, those aren't 2 bad losses. They're both perfectly understandable losses.
Right. Yep. They win the land grant trophy.
All right.
The Big Ten has too many trophies.
Yeah, they do.
I'm just going to say that right now. They have way too many trophies.
Oddly enough, Ohio State and Michigan don't play for a trophy.
Yeah, you would think that they would.
Yeah, of all the rivalries, they're the one that doesn't. That's the biggest one in the conference.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Kansas State knocks off Kansas for whatever, the Sunflower Cup or whatever.
Yeah, speaking of too many trophies.
Another trophy, but this is a cool trophy. Paul Bunyan's axe is won by the Wisconsin Badgers over the Minnesota Gophers. 34-24, and Wisconsin goes to the Big Ten title game. That was actually a pretty good game.
Yeah.
Winner of that game was going to go to the Big Ten title game, and it was a competitive game. Very good showing by both teams.
Minnesota, total props to you guys for those uniforms you wore. They looked awesome.
Yeah, right.
They looked great.
Speaking of uniforms, we didn't talk about this in the Territorial Cup. Sparky returned.
Yeah.
Sparky was on the ASU helmets. We're probably never going to see him again because we lost. But it was nice to see Sparky out there again. Move on. Louisville beats Kentucky 44-40. Congratulations, Louisville.
Yeah.
Again, ACC, they were 4-0 against the SEC this week.
Yeah, but Kentucky, come on.
Yeah, I know. Kentucky's been better, but they're 5-7. They're 0-5 on the road. No big deal. And now the team that's going to be leading the group of 5 teams, and the team that's probably the most eligible or going to be eligible for the spot in one of those New Year's Day bowls, our good old friend Boise State back in the picture.
Out of nowhere. Ranked
23 in the country, and they had a big win over Utah State, 50-19. They play Fresno State in the Mountain West title game this week. They're a 20-point favorite over the Bulldogs. And, Boise State, hello, my old friend. How are you?
The funny thing about this is that the 1 year where they're probably practically guaranteed one of these big bowls is the year they probably least deserve it.
Yeah, right? This isn't the Chris Pearson Boise State teams of old. This isn't Kellen Moore. This isn't the Statue Liberty play. This isn't any of that. This is just they're a decent mid-level team, but they're not any of those crazy offensive juggernauts that they used to be.
No, but they're going to get a big bowl bid. Hey, more power to them and their crazy blue turf.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we won't get to see them on the blue turf, thankfully. But
I watched some of that, whatever night it was on, Saturday night, I guess. And they had the blue turf, the all-blue uniforms. I thought, if I'm a fan that paid money to go see these guys and I'm way up in the upper seats, I'd hate this because you can't tell where anybody is. It's crazy.
I'm kind of over the gimmick.
Yeah, me too. Go back to green turf and shut up. You've established your program. You don't need it anymore.
And part of it was when they were one of those top teams, you saw them a whole lot, and so you saw the blue turf a ton.
Right.
And now it's just like, okay, we get it. You're blue. I understand. Like, I don't know how long they've had that, but it's outlived its usefulness at this point.
Absolutely. It was a nice gimmick for a while, but really time to move on.
Yep. And Colorado finishes their Pac-12 schedule winless with a 38-34 loss to number 25 Utah.
The Utes barely hanging on to get Colorado.
Yeah, well, the Utes have been pretty successful in their transition to the Pac-12. Colorado has not.
No.
Colorado has been abjectly terrible over the last couple of years.
Right.
So, sorry, Buffs.
No hope in sight, as far as I can tell.
We'll look ahead to next week and championship Saturday, Friday and Saturday. We'll move on to Friday, the Pac-12 title game at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. The Arizona Wildcats going to be in the top 10. They were number 11 last week, taking on the Oregon Ducks, number 2 in the country. Arizona knocked off Oregon in Autzen Stadium earlier this year. Oregon opens up as basically a 2-touchdown favorite, but Arizona, very capable of knocking off Oregon, as they already know, but you got to think Oregon's not going to overlook this one. They know that they can lose this team. They're going to be focused, right?
That's what I would think, yeah. I mean, unless it's just one of those things where Arizona just matches up really well against Oregon, and it's one of those deals like that, I don't think the Ducks are going to have too much trouble with this one.
The thing is, Arizona has the speed on defense to match up with Oregon's speed on offense. That's where the matchup comes in. And Scooby Wright, he's a defensive player there for the Wildcats. He's been a revelation for that defense. He's been leading the charge, and he had a very good game last time up in Autzen Stadium. So we'll see how it plays out in the first neutral site Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be an upset, but if I had to put money on it, I'm putting it on the Ducks.
To Saturday, the SEC title game in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. Number 1 Alabama taking on the Missouri Tigers. Alabama a 14.5-point favorite.
I got to think. Again, I think Missouri has a puncher's chance in this one, and they've certainly quietly snuck up on everyone, but this is Nick Saban. This is the Crimson Tide playing for a shot at the playoff. I don't think that Bama lets up off the gas pedal, and this one could get really ugly fast.
The ACC champion, or excuse me, the Dr. Pepper ACC championship game in Charlotte, North Carolina. Florida State Seminoles playing against the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck. Florida State's only a 4-point favorite in this game, and we already talked about it. But Georgia Tech, they're in this thing. They can very easily knock off this team, and boy, would that be fun. I think
Tech wins this game. I really do. Florida State has not impressed me all season. Georgia Tech runs the triple option offense, which, like I've said a gazillion times, if you haven't seen it, you're not familiar with it. It's very tough to defend. Florida State's been wholly unimpressive, and Georgia Tech would love nothing better than to win the ACC and knock out Florida State in the process. I like the Yellow Jackets in this one.
The Big 12 title picture comes down to TCU hosting Iowa State, and TCU's a 35-point favorite over the Cyclones. And then Kansas State and Baylor in Waco. That's really the important game. TCU is going to beat Iowa State unless something crazy happens, and I highly doubt that. But Baylor, I think Baylor has to be impressive in this win over Kansas State. It can't be tight. It can't be a loss, obviously, and they got to really prove themselves that they're better than Ohio State, that they're better than TCU, and that they deserve to be number 4.
They need to go out and put up one of those 70-point efforts against Kansas State. They've got to make this one. They've got to put an exclamation point on it and make it absolutely definite for them to have a real shot at this thing, because otherwise they're going to win the Big 12, but based on everything we've seen so far with this committee, they're not going to make the tournament despite that. So they've really got to go out and hang an impressive win up in this one.
And then, of course, Ohio State plays Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Wisconsin's a 4-point favorite over Cardell Jones, big Cardell Jones, and the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Honestly, even with JT Barrett, that Buckeyes defense, again, they played great once JT Barrett was out of the game and they were inspired. They shut down Michigan like nobody's business. But before that, they were having a real tough time with a team that had 5 wins at that time coming into that game. I mean, Michigan was doing pretty much whatever they wanted. So, I mean, unless Cardell Jones is the third revelation at quarterback for the Buckeyes, I think Wisconsin wins this game pretty easy, because the Buckeyes defense still isn't that solid. Now you've got your third quarterback. I don't know if he's got enough time to prepare for this, so I like Wisconsin in this one. And
the other, I guess, semi-important championship game going on would be Boise State, Fresno State, the Mountain West title game. If Boise State wins, they'll be the Group of 5 representative. If they lose, it could go to Colorado State, who Boise State beat. If Boise State were to lose, Colorado State would probably be the leader of that Group of 5 thing.
Colorado State, no kidding.
Yeah, Colorado State, right?
I think Boise takes care of business, no problem in that one.
Yeah, it should be. It should be no problem. But that is the week in college football championship weekend coming up. We will have playoff teams next week. It will all be decided. Move on to the National Football League. And we'll start with Thanksgiving. It was a good day. Lots of turkey, lots of family, but also good help of football. The earliest game, the Detroit Lions, they're still chugging along. They're looks like they're not going to have that same kind of swoon they had last year. They get a big win over the Bears, 34-17. The Lions are 8-4 and hanging around in that wild card picture in the NFC.
Absolutely. They played a good game, and they're not swooning like they did last year. I think they finished with 7 wins last year, so they're already ahead of the game.
Yep.
They're a quietly pretty good team that no one really seems to talk about a lot, but they finally got some offense, which is a good thing to see for them. And the Bears, wow.
Oh, Jesus.
What a tough season for the Bears. And they got up to the lead in that game, too. They were up 14-3, and then that was that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're terrible.
They are terrible. There's really no other two ways about it. They're just bad. Just a bad team.
5-7, but they're a lot worse than that. The middle game was the traditional game in Dallas where the Eagles and Cowboys were playing for first place in the NFC East. And the Eagles, they were just all over this thing early. A 33-10 win. Mark Sanchez, really effective in this game. 20 of 29, 217. LaShawn McCoy, 25 rushes, 159 yards. And the Cowboys continue their march to 8-8. They reached that 8-win plateau, and all of a sudden they've lost a few games in a row.
I was surprised at how the Eagles, they dominated this game. It was never in question. Now, I suppose there's two ways you could look at it, that the Eagles are just a better team than the Cowboys, or you can blame it on the blue jerseys. But in either case, the Cowboys lost. And they were dominated.
God, I hate that stupid throwback rule, so now that we can't have these fun throwback games on Thanksgiving anymore.
Right.
And the Cowboys just have to wear their regular blue jerseys. Like, come on, it's stupid.
They look great.
Yeah, they look fine. I don't mind them because at least all the silvers match.
Exactly, the colors match, and it's a spectacular uniform when they get all the colors right. But the homeroom uniform, good Lord. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that the Eagles went in and just dominated the way they did. But I don't know if that's an exposure to the Cowboys. It's one of those things. Who knows? We'll know. They've got the Bears this Thursday, so we're not going to learn much from that either.
Yeah. It's two straight Thursday games for the Cowboys and the Bears.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting because both teams have the full week of rest, but I still don't think they don't change their practice schedule, so they still only have like a couple days of practice. But whatever. It's going to be just probably another terrible Thursday night game, so
more
enjoy
likely.
That.
Yeah.
But the last game there on Thanksgiving night, the Seahawks and 49ers, both teams were 7-4. They're still fighting for second place in the NFC West, and potentially the division lead still. That's still very much in play for the winner of this game. And the winner of this game was Seattle Seahawks. And it was a 19-3 game, but it really wasn't that close. Colin Kaepernick is terrible.
Yeah, there's no two ways about it.
He's terrible. He's completely ineffective. He can't throw accurately. He can't run that well anymore. He's terrible. And it was a great performance by the Seahawks defense, no doubt. But Colin Kaepernick he's done. He's of no use to anybody anymore.
Here's the thing: I would not trade Brian Hoyer for Colin Kaepernick straight up right now. I just wouldn't do it.
No.
And that's not because Hoyer's good. He might not even start this Sunday. It's just because Kaepernick had that one flash of brilliance the first year he took over for Alex Smith, and since then he has just been not a good quarterback at all. Mm-hmm. And again, Seattle's got a very tough defense, but this isn't anything new for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, they barely got by a really bad Washington team last week. They barely, 16 points against the New York Giants, the same team that, Jacksonville beat yesterday. Come on.
Yeah.
Not a good quarterback.
And Russell Wilson, he did enough.
That's all he ever does.
He's starting to slip in terms of effectiveness, too. But on the other hand, the Seattle defense, they're starting to spur them forward. Yeah. And now the Seahawks are one of the hotter teams in the league right now.
8-4, and now they're only 2 games back of the division lead. And the Super Bowl,
not 2 games; they're a game back.
Yeah, they are. That's
the Cardinals,
right. That's right.
They fell to 9-3.
I forgot. Yeah, the Cardinals. That was their 3rd loss. So yeah.
And the Seahawks play in Arizona in 2 weeks. Or 3 weeks.
They looked like they were in the midst of a Super Bowl slump season, but they seem to have pulled out of the nosedive, and all of a sudden, this team's getting pretty scary. I'm already thinking, fine if they make the playoffs, but I don't want them to have home field because I don't want the Packers to have to go there. That's how much better these guys have gotten. Offense is still a little suspect, but that defense is every bit as good as it was last year.
Yeah, 2 interceptions for Richard Sherman in this game, leading the way. We'll move over to Sunday, and early games. The Colts, it was close there with Washington for a little too long for my liking. But Andrew Luck, 5 touchdown passes, 370 yards, did what he did, leading the Colts to a 49-27 win. And leading the Colts in rushing again, Boom Herron, 8 rushes, 88 yards, and a touchdown.
Boom Herron, the old former Ohio State Buckeye, getting the job done for the Colts.
Could the Colts have finally found a running back?
Well, if anything,
possible?
It's probably going to keep them from signing Ray Rice, and that's good enough for me.
But that's one of the off-field things. We don't need to talk about the whole thing, but Ray Rice won his appeal.
Right.
Which we kind of all knew he was going to. Because
look, I don't. No
you can't punish him twice.
Yeah, I don't condone for a second what he did, but yeah, he deserved to win this appeal because at the end of the day, it's just got to be about the rule of law or the rule of whatever, and the NFL broke those rules. So sorry, but he absolutely
can't
won.
Him twice, and they knew, and he never lied to anybody. He told them exactly what happened.
Right.
They just decided to do what they did, and then they changed their mind once the video came out. So Ray Rice wins the appeal, and he's free to sign with anybody. Do you think he will sign with anybody this season? Because I have no doubt somebody will give him a shot next year.
Oh, yeah.
But this season, does he get an NFL job?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I would have thought the Colts and the running game is so bad that they might have been desperate enough to take a shot. But with Boom Herron, I mean, granted, he's not your long-term solution, but
No.
if he can get the job done, I don't know. I don't know of anybody else that might take a look at him. I'm thinking probably more likely he's going to sign with the team next year and have a chance to earn a spot. But I don't know if anybody signs him this year.
And people have to remember, too, the last time he was playing football, he was not great.
No, not at all. Let's not remember him as like this great running back that's out there waiting to sign with someone, because he's not. He's
going to be 28, and that's when running backs really start to go over the hill. As weird as that is, only 28, you're over the hill.
Yeah.
But that's the way NFL running backs work, unfortunately. Quickly through the other teams there in the AFC South. The Texans with a 45-21 win over the Titans. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 358 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Jeez.
DeAndre Hopkins, two touchdowns were 238 receiving yards.
Yeah, I almost played him on Sunday in one of my fantasy teams, and I didn't. I still ended up winning anyway, but had I played him, it would have never even been close.
Yeah, and remember all those weeks ago when your irrational confidence was behind the Titans? Those days are long gone.
Yeah, and I won't be doing that again next year. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, long gone are the days of anything being thought of the Titans. Ken Wisenhunt not having a great year.
No,
behind with the headset there.
But in fairness to the Titans, they really have not had a quarterback. I mean, Jake Locker was serviceable at best when he was playing at his very best. He was just serviceable. Now you got Zach Mettenberger. They need a quarterback worst of all, I think, but they're in a lot of trouble. Yeah, there will be no irrational confidence for them next year. None.
Finishing out the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars, their second win of the season with a big rally. They were down 21-0, but they came all the way back to win 25-24, giving Blake Bortles another win in his NFL career.
This Giants team is just terrible.
Ugh, they're awful.
I mean, you can't. I mean, okay, look, I understand that this is a back and forth game, and it's just okay, neither team's very good. They were up 21-0 on the Jaguars and lost. You just can't do that. You can't ever let that happen. And I think
you can't play those Jaguars at home, man. They're tough. That giant TV screen scares everybody.
But I think Tom Coughlin's done after this season. I heard somebody on NFL Network Radio. Yeah, they just said, look, it's not, he's a good coach and all that, but there just comes a point where it's just time to go in a different direction. I don't think he's a bad coach. It's just that this team's just not responding to him anymore, so you just got to go in a different direction.
Are they not responding, or have they lost talent?
Well, it's probably a little of both. But
I would think I would give him one more year.
Yeah, I would too, but I think
this is just another kind of abomination. And you get him some more to work with next year, maybe.
Right.
And you see what you can do, but I don't know. He's been a very good coach there, and Eli doesn't have a whole lot of help right now.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, would I fire him? No, because right now, who's out there that's better that you can get? That's the thing.
Yeah.
You got a guy with 2 Super Bowl rings on his resume. If you can find a guy better than that, go get him. But I don't know who's available that you could go grab that you could do anything with. So, but that's me. I think the Giants will cut him loose. I really do.
Let's move to our good friends in the AFC North.
Oh, what a bad division.
Greg, your Browns, not good. 26 loss, but that touchdown they scored in the fourth quarter Is it the Johnny Manziel era in Cleveland now, Greg? Because Brian Hoyer benched, Johnny Manziel comes in, gets a rushing touchdown, puts up the money sign when they were down by 16 late in the fourth quarter.
Okay, two things about this. First off, what's driving me nuts about this game, the Bills hold off Manziel rally to stymie Browns. Okay, give me a freaking break, okay? He had one touchdown. You lost by 16. There was no holding him off. I'm hating. That's what I'm hating about this. The Bills are getting. It's like they shut down. Like Johnny Manziel fell one short pass short of beating them. It never even came close to that. But
Manziel mania.
On the topic at hand, I guess at this point with the Browns, they've got a decision to make here. Brian Hoyer's had 3, 4, 5 bad games in a row now.
But he has 7 wins without Josh Gordon.
I know. So here's the question: the offense has looked inept for the past couple of weeks. Just they can't get anything done. So do you say, okay, we're going to go with Manziel and hope for the best, or do you keep trying to make a playoff run? And that's the question they have to answer right now.
Right.
Because if you put Manziel in, it's kind of like you're almost maybe you're not waving the white flag, but you're showing the rest of the team that you're more concerned about developing him than you are about winning playoff games or wanting to get to the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because with the win, the Browns fall to 7-5, and the Bills move up to 7-5. So once all the games were done in the AFC, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that are 7-5, tied for that last playoff spot with Miami.
Right.
And all those teams are just a game behind San Diego at 8-4, who's the second wild card. So, I mean, all these teams are going to fall off one by one, but I mean, 7-5 is the calling card for the AFC North right now, because the Bengals are able to move ahead just barely. But Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, all 7-5. So,
I don't know. I mean, would you start Manziel over Hoyer at this point?
No.
I don't think I would either. I mean, I understand the logic behind it. You want to try to give the offense some kind of spark, but you're still, I mean, granted, you're on life support, but you're still in a playoff race right now. I don't know that you dump everything and go with the rookie quarterback right now. I just don't know if you do that.
And 7-5, again, all those wins are Brian Hoyer's, and they were without Josh Gordon, and the defense is slipping a little bit. But I think for this season, maybe for the long term, Brian Hoyer's still the best option they have for the time being.
I think so too.
If Johnny Manziel was better than Brian Hoyer, he would have started already.
Right.
If they thought that he had a better shot at winning the football games, he would have started already.
Yeah, because go ahead.
Well, and they haven't announced who's going to start this week. They're being coy about it. But Brian Hoyer's still the best shot they have at trying to win, to stay in playoff contention right now.
Exactly.
And I mean, they might just get a huge handing to them this week when they play the Colts in Cleveland. But you know, if Brian Hoyer plays this game, I think they have a better shot at knocking off the Colts than if they play Johnny Manziel. I do too. But here's the thing. Okay, I don't know if I say give Hoyer, if you're really considering it, give Hoyer this week. Okay. Yeah. If they go out and if the Colts come in and they win 45-10, yeah, it's probably time to make a change. Because he just clearly can't run the offense. But if it's close, or if they get the win, then you got to stick with him because he is the better chance. And like you said, if Manziel was as good as everybody thinks he is, he would have already been in there. But he couldn't even beat out Brian Hoyer for a starting job. Now, Brian Hoyer he's a serviceable quarterback, but it's not like he was going up against Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck or Tom Brady to win this job, and he couldn't even beat out Hoyer. So I stick with Hoyer, because I still want to take a shot at the playoffs. But once the playoffs are out of the picture, yeah, you got to put Manziel in there and see what you got. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, and really, I mean, 7-5 is better than you could have expected for the Browns. Oh, absolutely, season, right? Yeah. If this record had been reversed, I thought they'd be having a good season. They're 5-7 right now. Yeah, you know. Yeah, so I mean, they're chugging along. But we'll move on to their other friends there at 7-5 in the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens, they lose. The Chargers come around from behind 21 points, in the fourth quarter. And Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, we've counted them out for a little while, but now they've swung around with a 34-33 win over the Ravens. The Chargers are now 8-4 and leading the wild card race in the AFC. Where we kind of left the Chargers for dead, but here they are.
I'm gonna go back and pull back one of our early predictions that we've been so wrong about so many times ago. The Chargers are right where the Chargers are right where we predicted they would be at this point. They're
a game behind Denver,
and they're leading the wild card race. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Phil Rivers, 34-45, 383, and 3 touchdowns. He kind of slumped there in the middle of the season, but he's gotten right back up.
I think this is a good. It's not the worst loss in the world for the Ravens either. I mean, they played them tight, but you can't give up 21 points in the fourth quarter at home. You just can't do it.
No.
But yeah, the Chargers are. But yeah, like I said, they're right where we predicted they would be. So I'm going to give us credit for that one.
Yeah, it's just this log jam in the AFC is kind of frustrating to look at.
It will straighten itself out as things move forward.
It will. The same thing happened last year, but man. We'll round out we'll keep going here with the AFC North and the Bengals. They go down to Tampa Bay and they damn near lost this football game.
I'll put it this way: if they have 11 players on the field instead of 12 with about 13, 14 seconds to go, Tampa Bay wins this game.
Okay, so what do you think about that at the end? So the Bengals get a penalty, right?
Yeah.
And Marvin Lewis throws the challenge flag, despite him not having any challenges.
Yep.
And because it was inside 2 minutes and he couldn't challenge anyway. But the way the rule works is that if you throw the challenge flag, they just take away your timeout, but they still look at the play.
See, that's nonsense.
No, you shouldn't get that benefit.
Because if you remember, it was the Jim Schwartz-led Lions a year or two ago threw the challenge flag when he didn't have one available, and that negated the challenge. That was like, and that's the way it should be. Inside of 2 minutes, when it all goes upstairs, if you throw the challenge flag, that's it. Maybe I don't have to throw a penalty in there or not, but you lose the timeout, and guess what? We don't challenge. We can't review the play now because that's the only fair way to do it, or everybody's going to start doing that now.
Right, because the Buccaneers had the ball on, the 20?
Yeah. If they don't get that penalty, they win. I mean, provided their field goal kicker can knock home a 32-yarder or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this killed the Buccaneers. This killed their playoff hopes.
It absolutely it destroyed their playoff hopes, and that's just unfortunate.
They were right there with everybody else. They had just as good a shot, and it got taken away from them by the referees. How dare you?
Sad to say, but that's probably true.
I know.
But the bigger issue here isn't that; it's that the Bengals.
Right. I mean, they're 8-3-1. They're a game and a half ahead in the division
right
now, but to almost lose to the Buccaneers.
To me, the Bengals are the Florida State of the NFL. They've got a good record, but they're not very impressive.
Yeah. That division is just bad.
I still think the Ravens are the best team in it, but I don't know if that's going to matter in the end.
Yeah. But the Buccaneers, their playoff hopes took a hit because of that loss.
Yeah.
But also because the two division leaders won some games we didn't think they were going to win. The New Orleans Saints, they go into Pittsburgh and win 35-32. Drew Brees, what a day. 257 yards, 5 touchdown passes. Ben Roethlisberger at 435 himself with only 2 touchdown passes. But the Saints, they move up to 5-7, and they won a game that both of us had pinned them down for a loss. A late game, November 30th in Pittsburgh, with Pittsburgh trying to make something for themselves too. And this is a game we didn't think they would win.
At the beginning of the season, in our wildest projections, we have ever guessed that the Saints would be on a 3-game home losing streak, then would go on the road in November and get a win at Pittsburgh.
No.
Not in a million years. No. Nope.
No, that was
Aren't the Saints, don't they have a better record? No, they're 2-4 on the road. So they've still got a better record at home, but only by 1 game.
Yeah, they're 3-3.
3-3 at home, 2-4 on the road.
Yeah. They're still not great. But
no, but that was a nice win for them. I mean, I got to give them credit.
Really good win. And props to them. And but they're still not first place despite the win. But we'll get to that in the afternoon games real quick. Finishing off the early games, the Vikings with a big win over the Panthers. And the Panthers, they were still kind of in this NFC South race, but man, they looked abjectly terrible.
Yeah,
Vikings blocked 2 punts for touchdowns. 14 points in the first 2 quarters, leading them to a 31-13 win over the Panthers in Minnesota. Just awful by the Panthers.
Yeah,
what happened to them?
They regressed like everybody thought they would. But
they regressed hard.
Yeah, but after the first 2 weeks, where they looked halfway decent, we all backed away from that. So maybe they're not as bad as we thought they were. But they're just a bad football team. And Cam Newton's not playing well. They just don't have a whole lot going for them right now. And this Vikings team is interesting. They're 5-7, but I mean that defense. They've 2 blocked punts for touchdowns yesterday. They're playing a team that I don't think that you want to play if you're in a playoff hunt right now because they're a little tougher than people give them credit for. The Vikings. So nice win by the Vikings. So with these Panthers, my God, are they awful? Jeez. Now I'm looking at them going, how did they ever win 3 games, or tie one for that matter? How did they ever score 37 points? How did that happen?
How did they tie the Bengals?
Exactly.
Yeah. But hey, Vikings 5-7, they'd be tied for the NFC South lead.
Oh God, yeah.
Scary to think about. Another team that's 5-7 and would be tied for the NFC South lead and had a huge win this week. The St. Louis Rams.
Wow.
52 to goose egg.
Yeah. The Rams just, geez, where did that come from?
With the largest point win margin in franchise history for the Rams. Wow. I got to watch some of this game because I was up in San Jose this week, and I'm sorry, Bay Area, that you got stuck with this horrible football game. But the Rams, they're far from pesky. They're frisky.
I think they're the good bad team this year.
They're really good. Their defense is good. Their defense is fantastic right now, and the offense is finding ways to make stuff out of it. And I mean, it was the Raiders, and they got their one win last week, but I think that's the only win they get this year.
Probably.
Just good win for the Rams.
I'm not surprised at all the Rams won this game, but 52 points.
That's a lot. That's a lot of points.
And I don't want to go down this road too far, but again, a couple of those games they lost early in the season, if they could get those back, that's a tough team right now.
Yep. The only other thing of note from this game, and we'll probably talk more about this on Thursday, before the game, the Rams players, a few of the Rams players came out for their introductions, and they were holding up the hands up, don't shoot sign, kind of reflecting what's going on in Ferguson, not too far away from St. Louis, and they've had some kind of political turmoil with somebody that represents like the police chief association or some garbage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It was silly, but it's just something.
That'll be a good topic for Thursday. Yeah,
to note from, and we'll talk a whole lot more about that on Thursday because there's a lot of facets to that we can get into.
Yep.
But we'll move on to the later games, and we'll move back to the AFC or NFC South, where the Falcons, they stay tied for first place with a 29-18 win over the Cardinals. And, the Cardinals' defense had been holding in the games, but the defense didn't look great. And despite what Bruce Arians might have said a few weeks ago, Drew Stanton is not a quarterback this team could win the Super Bowl with.
No, not at all. Not at all. Here's the question. Is the clock starting to strike midnight on the Cardinals here a little bit?
I think so.
I mean, the Falcons dominated this game. I mean, don't let that score fool you. It was theirs all the way through, I thought.
Yeah. No, definitely. They don't. And the other thing with these last two losses for the Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald's been out. And I think that's probably more of an issue with the offense.
Right.
Is not as a Stanton, but Drew Stanton doesn't have. Their leading rusher was Marion Grice, former Sun Devil, 5 rushes for 16 yards. And they got horribly outpossessed because of that with time of possession because they can't run the ball. They can hold on to the ball. They can't hold on to it. They're not screening first downs. And so the defenses, they keep going back out there on the field. And even a team like the Falcons can eventually wear you down. Well,
here's the thing, too, with talking about the Falcons for a second. If Mike Smith doesn't just manage the clock so horribly last week against the Browns, the Falcons are in the driver's seat right now. I mean, they're a 500 football team.
Right, yeah.
And that hard as it is going to be to believe when you're talking about a 5-7 team, with that botched clock management at the end of that Cleveland game might have cost this team the division in the long run, because the Saints, it's one of those things where you're going to look back on it and go, man, it was important then, it's really important now. But Falcons are, I don't know, they look pretty good. I'm not ready to say that they're turning it around, but a nice win, a win nobody thought they would get. So that's when they needed to have.
The Falcons hold the tiebreaker over New Orleans right now, so they're technically in first place.
Yeah.
But they do play each other in a few weeks, and unless either of these teams wins one of those games we don't think they're going to win, probably still going to be under 500.
More likely.
They'd have to win the 4 games in a row.
Yeah, but I think we are out of the woods of the 5-11 division champion at this point, maybe.
Yeah, unless they both lose. The dream of 5-11 is dead. But hey, 6-10.
Yeah,
6-10 is still very much in play. We'll go to the last of the afternoon slate. Super Bowl 48.5. Your Green Bay Packers taking on the New England Patriots in Lambeau Field. What a game this was. But impressive showing there by the Packers, and they're able to outlast the Patriots 26-21 in Lambeau. Just a duel between two of the better quarterbacks in this league. Aaron Rodgers, 368, 2 touchdowns. Tom Brady, 245, 2 TDs. Just a great game all around. And your Pack come out on top and move up to 9-3.
The thing that impressed me the most about this game was the defense by the Packers. They, again, not a dominant performance, but when they had to make the plays, they made them. This was one of those games where it was just a matter of running out of time. Because the Patriots, as much as I hate to say it, that Patriots team is really, really, really good. And Rob Gronkowski is just an absolute beast. I had not seen them play a full game this season, but this, again, probably meaningless in the overall scheme of things in the standings, unless, we're talking home field for the NFC, but a great win for the Packers. It was just it was a really good football game. And I put these two teams on a neutral site. I don't know what happens, but wow. It was just a really great game by the Packers, and defense played outstanding.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing this game again in February. Yeah, but
I'm already planning on my shareholder Super Bowl ring, so yeah, I'm good to go.
The other thing here for the Patriots, though, their running game, they were running effectively with LeGarrette Blount for a little while, and they just went away from him.
Yeah.
This is the one thing that Bill Belichick just never seems to manage correctly, in my eyes, is the running game, especially week to week.
Yep.
Because 2 weeks ago, Jonas Gray runs for 200-something yards, 4 touchdowns on the Colts. And then he was late for practice one day on a Friday and doesn't get hardly any playtime last week. I can't remember if I even saw him carry the ball this week.
I know he got 1 carry for sure. I think he might have got maybe a couple more, but it wasn't much, yeah.
The way he manages the personnel to send a message or whatever the hell, I just don't understand. Just be an effective football to run an effective game plan, you should use everything you have available. And if something's working, don't go away from it like they did with LeGarrette Blount. But what do I know? I'm not a National Football League coach.
Well, Blount was doing a great job. He was just big power back, getting the job done against the Packers defense, and all of a sudden they just quit using him.
Yeah.
And in a tight game, and it was just Bill Belichick's a great coach, but some of the decisions he makes just your head scratchers. You go, what's that all about? But I'll take it. Because I think if they leave Blount in the game,
you gotta wonder whether maybe Blount said something on the sideline or something.
I don't know,
but I don't know. We'll move on to the Sunday night game where the Broncos, they just keep doing what they're doing. A 29-16 win over the Chiefs, and the Chiefs, they've been making that surge. They now lose 2 consecutive games to the Raiders and Broncos. They're at 7-5, just like half the AFC, and the Broncos. They're right there pacing it with the Patriots, 9-3, and this kind of week is big in terms of going forward, because I think the way it works out is with the AFC. If it's probably going to be the Patriots and Broncos, right? If the game's in New England, I like New England.
Yep.
If the game's in Denver, I like Denver.
Yep.
Both teams are both 9-3. They're both going to be trying to outpace each other to get that home field advantage, because I think that's going to be really big when we get down to January.
Well, yeah, because I think the Broncos lose the head-to-head tiebreaker, right? Because they lost to New England this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but okay, you want to know the difference between a playoff contending team like, say, the Cardinals and a Super Bowl contender like the Broncos? Sunday night's game was the perfect example of that. The Broncos didn't play particularly well, but they got the job done, and they got the win against a very tough football team on the road. That's what separates the true contenders from the guys that are kind of biting at the heels of everything. Manning was only 179 yards and 2 TDs. I take that out of Brian Hoyer every week, but they just got the job done. They won. It wasn't pretty, but they got the job done, and they beat a tough Chiefs team. So that's what makes them a Super Bowl contender.
For sure. They were effective. Peyton Manning only 179, 2 touchdowns, but not much better than Alex Smith.
C.J. Anderson, got 168 rushing yards, which you don't see that a lot with the Broncos these days.
Yeah. Again, San Francisco, would you like Alex Smith back? Maybe. Maybe. Because I think 153 and 2 touchdowns would have done you well this week against against the Seahawks. But what do I know?
Well, that's the thing, though. Alex Smith, Chiefs are clearly a run-first team. Alex Smith on a run-first team, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that's still 25 yards more than passing than Colin Kaepernick had.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, I understood the move at the time because Kaepernick looked like he was the next big thing, but wow, I don't know that you go ahead and let your second-string quarterback, who's got a pretty good track record, walk away until you're sure. I think the 49ers are good quarterback hunting after this season.
So the Chiefs, they fall to 7-5 with the rest of the logjam. But the top of that 7-5 heap, based on tiebreakers, and that second wild card leader is the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
The 16-13 win over the Jets on Monday night in the rain and cold and hail of Life Stadium. So the Dolphins, hey, we put them down early, and here they are. They're on top of the logjam of 7-5 teams there in the AFC.
I just want to go back. That's another prediction I'm going to give us back. The Dolphins are right where we thought they would be, too.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean, they're right. They could very well get 10 wins like we thought they could. 7-5. They're right there. They're in contention. So
the interesting thing to me about this game, Geno Smith's passing line, 7 of 13 for 65 yards. This is like the quarterback line from an old Oklahoma game back in the 70s when they ran the wishbone.
Oh, he's so bad.
Defense looks pretty solid. I'll give them that. They have a pretty solid defense. But Miami, and again, I think if I heard right, 49 straight times, if they were trailing in the fourth quarter on the road, they lost all 49 times. Last night was the first time in 49 games they had trailed in the fourth quarter on the road and come back to get the win.
Oh.
So good for them.
Good for them.
Playing tough football. The Dolphins team, they're a tough football team. I don't know if they're series contender good, but they're a tough team.
I'd like to see them in the playoffs just for new blood.
I would too.
But I think that does it. Looking forward to another fantastic week. College football with championship weekend to kind of sort out the playoff picture, and that'll be fun. And what should be another compelling weekend in the NFL as well. But let's mercifully end this thing due to all the technical difficulties that we've had all day. Greg's going to have a hell of a time editing this, but he'll get it out to you when he
I've saved patience in worse shape than this one, so we'll be all right.
All right. For Greg, I'm Zach. This has been Basically a Football Show. Follow us on all of our various platforms and such. Listen to Basically a Sports Show. We'll talk next week. Enjoy the football. See you later, everybody.